Good day, everyone. Welcome back to the Doc of Detox show. Today's very special guest is Peter Webb. Peter Webb is a world leader in radionics, organic farming, and the health of all human beings. I mean, that's a big title, isn't it? But look it, if you like this information as much as I like it, then you're going to want to make sure that you join us for our live Q&A on December the 11th. So after you've gone through all this information, you've watched this show, let other people watch this show, and you'll find out that we can bring back farming to where it was thousands of years ago. I'm talking about the oxygen content that the dinosaurs used to live off of. I'm talking about the greenery that they would live off of. We can get that all back, and we can get that back through the amazing technology that this man has created, okay? So I know you're going to love this show. This show is called Revitalizing the Farm. And if you revitalize the farm, you're going to revitalize the soil. You're going to revitalize the air. You're going to revitalize the food. And that means you're going to revitalize the people, which means you're going to bring back people's immune system, which means you're going to bring back the joy of living. So make sure you join us on December the 11th for this live Q&A at 3 p.m. Pacific Standard Time. And make sure that you get all your questions together and get all your challenges together, because a lot of people are just going to go, well, I don't really believe this. But understand something. Fasten your seatbelt, and you're going to find out that even though we're in times of sometimes crises and the world is becoming more toxic, just understand that there are technologies, techniques, and strategies that are going to give you what people had thousands of years ago. Now, there's a big mouthful, but I want to welcome my dear friend, Peter Webb. Hi, Peter.
Hi, Darrell.
How's it going?
It's going good. Yeah, so you want me to continue, do you?
Well, I'd love for you to, first of all, I want people to listen to your story when you were young. And
Okay.
let's take us on a journey. People want to see your story. They want to hear your story, because your story is why you got to where you got to. And then the pitfalls and the bumps in the road are all things that help you become challenged and think outside the box to get us where we are today, right?
That's correct, yeah.
Okay.
Exactly. I was born in England during the war, the Second World War, on a farm. And it was a tough time. We had no imports of anything like sugar or anything like that. So everything was produced on the farm. Now, we had a very large mixed farm because we had cattle, hogs, laying birds, meat birds, and turkeys and geese. We raised and sheep. And when we were farming with a 2-bottom plow behind a 20 horsepower tractor. And after the war was over, the big chemical companies came in with the pesticides and fertilizer. And my father, he was always progressive, and he went full steam ahead with the fertilizer. And as we progressed through this, year after year, we were having more problems with weeds. And the interesting thing was the food that was grown prior to the fertilizer, our cattle, hogs, all our livestock required no vitamins or minerals in their diet. But as we moved along, the land started tightening up. The tractor that we had to pull the 2-bottom plow with ended up being 150 horsepower from a 20 horsepower. To break a seed bed, we used to have a team of horses and a straight set of harrows once over, and we had a seed bed. Everything was composted. The end result was tractor. It was 150 horsepower with a rototiller to create a seed bed, and at the same time we were putting in up to 100 pounds of vitamins and minerals in each ton of feed for the livestock. And as we progressed along, my father said, you know, we're getting bigger crops, but we're making less money. All our money is going into buying inputs to grow these crops. And it was a decision he made. We all made this decision to downsized, so we sold the farm and we moved to another farm where I just raised hogs and my dad just raised poultry. And after a while, we decided I wanted to come to Canada. So in England, went to the agriculture university. So I took breeding and genetics and animal nutrition at the University of Guelph. And then I started my own pig farm, and we built it up to 600 sow farm to finish with producing over 300 market hogs a week.
Peter, if I could, can we regress just a little bit?
Yeah.
When you were talking earlier that you had a 20 horsepower plow.
Right.
Okay, so that was because the soil was alive, rich with oxygen. When you started using the fertilizers, the chemical fertilizers, it cemented the soil, so you weren't able to actually dig up the earth and do what you needed to do because the soil was cemented by this. It glued it together.
The soil life, all of the earthworms and bacteria and fungi that work in the soil to keep healthy soil, they died off, and that's where the soil became like cement. It became hard and compacted, and of course, the sicker the soil, the more weeds you had. And we grew sugar beet, potatoes, oats, food, bread, milling wheat, malting barley. We had various crops that very big wide, even broad beans and a lot of green peas. We grew. It was all food crops basically that we were growing. And but like I said, after the soil died, it was costing far more to create a seed bed, and then on top of that, you're supporting the plant with these artificial fertilizers, where the life in the soil, it actually. A lot of that fertilizer leached out of the soil because there was no carbon to hold it in the soil. Yeah, it was a lesson that everybody looked at, and we were a family farm, and we sold all our poultry and everything in London at the vegetable market or livestock market where they sold the poultry, and it's the same as the one in Toronto, and so. Yeah, we saw the soil, and then of course, in these situations, you get the farms have to get larger and larger and larger, and the farm that we had, 250 acres, ended up part of a 3,000 acre estate owned by a insurance company. So it was then the business by a big multinational, and this was the way a lot of the farms have gone. Even today, it's still the same thing. The farms are getting bigger and bigger and more automation, and there's less contact with the animals now. They're all being milked by robots, and robots are doing most of the work in these modern dairy farms. Everything is yeah.
So what we're looking at, it's the same everywhere. I mean, they want chemicals in our soil, they want chemicals in our food, and they want us to take chemicals to kill the pain. So
that's right.
I don't care what people really think about when I say things like this, but there's an actual evil out there, and it's a corporate evil. And so basically, these chemicals actually caused your family to get rid of the farm, because the other thing is that you didn't want to be farming dead food, did you? Like empty food. That's
correct. And when we had our own hog farm in Canada, we were spreading the manure with the irrigation system, and the guy came back and he said, "You got to come back and see what's going on." I said, "What do you mean?" He said, "Well, you come and take a look. Every earthworm in the soil, they come to the top and died. That's at that point, the soil was being killed by raw manure, and to a certain degree, the antibiotics that's in the manure from the livestock. And then, of course, come in the army worms. We hadn't seen army worms before. So
what's an army worm? And is it a good worm or not a good worm?
No, an army worm, they're like an army of caterpillars. They cross the fields, they strip the plants from top to bottom. All that's left is the stalk. And that's a sign that the crop is sick. you got to understand, in nature, you got the wolf. He hunts the weakest animals. You got the plants. So the plants are giving off a infrared light that insects like potato bugs, aphid strips, all the flying insects that consume plants fly along, and they see this infrared signature, and they go down and consume the sick plants. And this is why they only eat the sick plants. The healthy plants they don't go near. So this is why I've made a passion in the last 40 years to be able to come back with a way of bringing nature back into the soil. What I'd like to suggest is we had a disease get in our hog farm, and we had over 7,000 pigs dead in about 3 weeks. That's basically where we threw up our hands and said and there wasn't a cure, because it could be carried in the manure for 20 years. It could be carried in rats and mice for 3 years. So it was no point trying to clean it up and repopulate again. So I took a position with one of the largest premix companies in Canada, and I covered part of Montana, all of Alberta, and a part of Saskatchewan, a major part of Ontario at one time. And the thing that was beating everybody in nutrition was just when the barns were tie barns, and the cows were all tied in stalls. And why was there so many health problems with those animals? Nobody, they always said, well, it's the feed. But I was a little more forward thinking. And I realized there was an external thing that was affecting the health of these animals. And as I found out there, and this is where the Revitalizer, we'll discuss that, but there are magnetic lines that cross the whole planet. And there's some of them, the Curry net, ley lines, Hartmann grid. They've all got names, and they crisscross backwards and forwards.
So these are invisible frequency meridians that are around the world?
Yeah, they're part of the Earth's aura.
Okay.
They go to the height of gravity. What we found was that these lines were attaching to the stabling in the barn, and then they carry the resonance of electricity, because you get electricity. It's a DC current, and it has a clockwise spin. And as it goes through the barn, if it hits the back of the cow, it causes reproductive problems. If it hits the head of the cow, it creates hormonal problems. What it does is, this clockwise spin, it actually interferes with, and this would be applied to plants and humans as well. And half of the vitamins and minerals that we consume have a positive spin, the other half have a negative spin. In nature, when it's in balance, the cell does a clockwise rotation. It pauses for nutrients to go into the cell and waste from the cell, and then it does a counterclockwise rotation. And that's how certain minerals, we'll say selenium will go in, but if vitamin E isn't with it, then the selenium doesn't work. So you got to have all these elements in the feed. And once we learned this, I went to the trouble of building a system to eliminate these geomagnetic lines running through the barns, and we turned everything around. And when I look back, when we raised pigs before the fertilizer thing, there was no such thing as iron injections. There wasn't the electricity and other pollution, so these pigs didn't need an iron injection, because iron is, once it's one of the elements that is needed in everything, all life. Looking back at the pigs back then, they were working, playing, and not trying to mutilate each other. But as soon as we went into the controlled environment barns, where these electromagnetic fields were going up and down, the iron wasn't being absorbed into the bloodstream, and the pigs would start biting their tail to become cannibalism, because they were deficient in iron. So what we did was, by balancing the system, we were able to make all these elements available to the animals.
So you balanced the invisible energy grid, which helped to balance the physical problems that they were suffering from.
Yeah, yeah, exactly.
Can I ask,
So
can I kind of, I don't want to take you off track, but was it actually the pig manure that you were spreading out on the fields that was actually killing the good worms and allowing the army worms to move in?
yeah,
Because,
that manure was what they call anaerobic.
yeah,
It's it went on the land. It's it creates well, it's anaerobic, so there's no oxygen in it, and it does a fermentation. Rather, anaerobic is a fermenter. Oxygen it brings life.
yes,
So the oxygen was choked off. Besides this undigested manure, and this is where, as we go through this thing, I've got questions about it towards the end on the manure and how. Well, we can just touch on it now because if you put oxygen into manure, you can spread it. It composts, so you can spread it on the growing crops, and it doesn't burn the soil. It doesn't need raw manure that we were putting on. Takes a year before it's available to the crop. It just has to go through that process of decomposing and. But anyway, yeah, this whole thing of electromagnetic pollution is becoming increasingly
worse.
worse. And I can tell you, when I was doing this work, I went to a farm near Guelph because we were doing work all over pretty much Europe when we were in this business of balancing electromagnetic fields. And this farmer, he sold an acre of land to a cell phone company, and they built the cell phone tower, and immediately his cows stopped drinking. They urinated on each other because they got a shock off the ground. Their skin turned like parchment. He said the soil got so hard that they couldn't work it. And of course, the end result was they had to leave the farm. And somebody would come in and just work the fields without livestock because this is what's happening. And we've been dealing with this a lot in Wisconsin and other states, South Dakota, and it's a challenge. But I think we've got to the point now where we've come up with a solution for most of these problems. So coming back now to we'll say the beginning of the revitalization was the balancing system. Everything comes in baby steps. It's nothing that just the whole picture come together. So we got into radionics, and we have a lot of machines. And
What is radionics, please?
radionics is an instrument that tunes to a frequency. So if you wanted to tune for, we'll say, oxygen, you set the dial for oxygen, and it creates it. Same as hydrogen. We've even gone to the point of adding helium into the water to make the water lighter so it hydrates more efficiently. But, going back to that point in time, I was putting in vitamins and minerals into the balancer system. We were using, because you got to understand, every mineral has a color attached. If the color is gone, the mineral doesn't work. So we've been having to put the colors, the full spectrum of colors back into all the work that we do. So that was basically how we started. Okay, then I went on. I was hired by a large engineering company to produce a radionic device to clean lakes and sewage ponds. And it was cumbersome. It was in an aluminum box with a radionics machine, a coil to amplify everything, a battery, solar panels, and then the antenna that went into the water. And it opened my eyes because my father he farmed entirely by the moon. He did planted by the moon. We harvested by the moon and everything else. We were monitoring the oxygen. So this thing would put in 10, 15 parts a million of oxygen into the water. And then because you're feeding aerobic bacteria. They need the oxygen to survive. So 4 days before the full moon and 4 days after, these microorganisms went into a feeding frenzy, and they would drop the oxygen right back down to 1 or 2 because they were in a state where they were hungry and breaking down all the waste in the water in the bottom of the sewage lagoon. And when you do that, you eliminate all of the gases that smell. And so then I realized people need oxygen in their digestive systems. They need it in their whole body, in their blood, and everywhere else. So we made up another water unit that ran water through and started putting it on dairy farms and poultry farms. And it also reduced the mortality in pig and poultry farms by 90%. And the days to market for the hogs dropped by 10 to 20 days. So we've made a lot of strides. Now we've settled on the Revitalizer unit. So when this is connected to this grid system that Mother Nature has provided for us, so you've got one positive tube going into the ground and one negative tube. Now, these are programmed to draw in all of the greenhouse gases from the atmosphere from about, well, we say 5,000 feet up. And oxygen has an electrical charge. And the electrical charge is stripped off to power the box. Doing that, if you have agricultural land, the oxygen is only in the top 10 to 12 inches. There's nothing below that. So, but by stripping the electrical charge off it, we can put that down 5,000 feet in the ground. But
1 second. You can put what 5,000 feet down into the ground?
The oxygen.
So you're saying oxygen is around 15 inches deep?
Yeah.
And now you can go 5,000 feet deep?
Yeah.
Oh, so you can grow crops all the way to China?
Well, I don't know about that.
I'm kidding.
But anyway, no, the reason is that it gives us a look into the soil, where actually what I've programmed this now is to put everything into the top 10 feet. The oxygen, the carbon, the hydrogen, everything goes in.
What do you do with the Revitalizer, though? Do you bury it? You bury it, right?
No, it can be buried, but it can also, in this time of year, if it's too difficult to bury it, you can stand it beside a tree. As long as those two tubes are on the ground, it will operate. But when the soil loosen up, we recommend it's put in a safe location and buried in the ground, so where no animals or equipment that go near it.
Now,
and
can I ask a question? How far do you bury it down?
Just to the top of the lid is about the best place to go. Don't bury it. You can cover it if you want. But in the wintertime,
you just need to have the two copper pipes in, right?
Well, and yeah, until you get it. Once the winter comes, it'll stand the frozen ground. It's a military type case.
Right.
It's very durable.
Okay.
So basically, by putting these elements down to say the 10 feet, it gives all the life in the soil, the bacteria, the earthworms, and all the fungi that operate in the soil. It allows them to go to a much deeper area. And actually, when we're harvesting all these greenhouse gases, they're being put into the soil as a liquid. It's a brown. It's not to the level of maple syrup, but it's a brown. It has a sticky effect on the soil. So what it does, it actually bonds the soil together to hold. If you're putting in fertilizer, or it holds it in place, it doesn't allow it. And the same as the soil, it bonds it together. So if you have a lot of rain, you don't get the runoff that you'd normally have. The carbon is what we're putting in on, we'll say, 2,000 to 3,000 acres. We're putting in somewhere between 20 and 30 ton of carbon an acre.
What does that mean, like to the average person? Can you explain that? 20 tons of carbon to the acre.
Well, it's 20 ton of this liquid type carbon. It's what would be if you spread it over the top. It would be a very small layer on the top, but because you're putting it right into the soil, it's acting as a food for all the life in the soil.
If I
because every
if I
yeah,
can say something, so what I teach is the most important thing in life is invisible. That's frequencies.
yeah,
And we're getting something from the invisible and making something visible that we're putting into the soil.
that is correct. Yes, yes.
Great. Now, everybody, you'd better get this because this is real hard science. This is proven. And if you can wrap your head around this, then you might be able to wrap your head around getting yourself well. Go ahead, Peter.
Okay, we talk a lot about oxygen. With this technology, normally in a home or outside, the oxygen is around 10 parts per million. That's the normal range. Even in water at the top, it's normally that. With the Revitalizer box, we're getting as high as 23 parts per million of oxygen.
Wow. And
And
just so
even down,
yeah, and I was just going to
yeah,
say, just so everybody knows, I have one on my property, and anybody who wants to increase what would it do? I know we know what it does for the farm, and we'll come back to the farm. But why would I want to do that on my own property for my family?
you must know that people with cancer go to a hyperbaric chamber for
Yeah,
oxygen treatment to
yeah,
get rid of cancer.
yeah.
This is the same principle, but a lot of homes have basements and damp areas where black mold form. This, with a high oxygen in the home, mold doesn't form. It doesn't form in that high oxygen environment. But yeah, the whole thing is your air is cleaner in your home, and of course your body it has a very positive effect on. Okay, well, we'll get down to nuts and bolts on that one because in the human body, there are all kinds of bacteria on the skin, in the digestive system, in the bowels, all over the body. By getting this higher oxygen into your body, the bacteria in your digestive system work far more efficiently. They do a better job, and even your bowels are cleaner and healthier. Now, I'm sort of straying in there because we're going to link when you get into crops, and it's also applied to humans, the plasma. See, lightning is nature's way of balancing the soil's electricity. The soil has to be, or was originally created by by God to be a DC current, and there's enough DC current in this planet to run every light bulb and every machine on this planet without having to buy electricity.
Didn't Tesla prove that? He proved that, didn't he?
Tesla, yeah. So when you have land that's out of balance, you have lightning, and some is positive and some is negative. So the one will come from the cloud and hit the soil to balance the imbalance, or if it's too much positive in the soil, then it'll go back into the cloud again. So nature balances that. Now, a German scientist found out that using the plasma which lightning produces, which is somewhat like ozone, I have Tesla coils that I fire a high voltage backwards and forwards to create the plasma. So we incorporated that into Revitalizer box. Crops, so we've been getting crops with virtually no predator insects on them at all. We have people growing cucumbers that sometimes get belly rot or aphids or thrips on them, spider mites. They grow peppers, jalapeno, banana, red and yellow and orange bell peppers, tobacco, and there is no insects on those crops. I mean, even on a farmer's adjoining farm, they'd be spraying, once a week for bugs, whether they're pepper beetles or whatever they're trying, potato beetles. This is a problem with our food today. Most crops are getting up to 20 applications of pesticides, like carrots and potatoes and different things. So this would eliminate most of those applications. The whole idea is to produce food that's healthy. Now, I'll give you an example. We have farmers here that are second and third years, and they're getting 71 to 79 bushels of corn, pounds of sorry, 71 to 79 pounds per bushel of corn, where the average is around 35 to 40.
Wow.
We have on side-by-side fields, the wheat comes off 40 bushels an acre heavier. You see, this is one thing. Every crop is more nutrient dense, whether it's a soybean, kernel of wheat, or even the vegetables are all highly nutrient dense because of being able to bring all these elements together in one shot, like the life in the soil. You see, in reality, plants will communicate with the bacteria in the soil, and they will break down nutrients and put them back into the plant to keep it healthy.
And
And
if I can say something, Peter, we are a major distributor for Peter's Revitalizer, and we had somebody just buy a Revitalizer, and they're one of the biggest grow ops, and they had a fungus mold problem, and Peter had gone away. They hooked it up, and they didn't think it was working. And then when Peter came back from his holiday, they found out they hooked it up wrong, and within a 24-hour period, they saw the whole fungus mold thing leave their whole grow op. Hey, Peter?
that's right. Yeah, yeah. We've got 3 other grow ups that we're doing, and one guy, he has cannabis plants that are 10 feet across and 8 feet high, and that's how big they grow.
Wow.
So yeah, the plants will grow. We had one, he had a tunnel greenhouse, and the plants grew so high he had to take all the plastic off it, and they still grew about 4 or 5 feet above the greenhouse. So yeah, it's fascinating to see what crops are like. But when you get into vegetables, this is the other thing that we neglect. Everybody buys vegetables now from the store, and it has no shelf life. You can bring a lettuce home, and within a day it's going bad. It applies to tomatoes or anything else. So by putting all of the nutrients into the crop, they have a much longer shelf life, and they have a lot better taste. And this is, going back to the old farm where we used to bake a bread with our own wheat and bake it in the oven. That smell, boy, it was something else. And that bread was really good compared to what we get today. But yeah, this whole life thing is far more complicated, and most people really understand. There are so many parts to it. We have just come up with an innovation. I think it's going to be really great. We've been able to frequency every vitamin, mineral, protein, amino acid, and enzyme. And we're putting those frequencies into everything that we're doing now. We're not saying you got to go out and stop buying those products, but by being able to make them so much more available, it's a good thing. And your livestock appreciate it. I mean, we have dairy farmers, when the cows come in fresh, that have got cows that are producing 150 pounds of milk a day.
How much do they usually produce?
Well, it's usually up around 120, I think, is a normal amount. And then they drop as they go into lactation. But this year it was a difficult year, and we've got farmers with corn 12 feet high and 23 kernels around the bottom of the cob. Those are big cobs.
What are how many kernels are there usually around the bottom of the cob?
Somewhere around 18 to 20.
Wow. Okay. All right.
Yeah. So these are subtle changes that you see, and it's been a lot of fun. So we'll get back into one of the questions. One of the things we did, we had a request from India on a lake, Hassan Sagar Lake in Hyderabad, It was 4,000 acres, and it was so contaminated that you could almost walk on it. And the smell was just unbelievable. We put 2 units on that lake, and 15 days, the smell was gone. 2 months, the water was almost drinking standard. They were canoeing and boating and sailing on this lake. People were really enjoying it, but we could never get it to drinking standard. And then they admitted there's 55 million liters of raw sewage a day going in that lake. And 2 revitalizers kept that lake that clean. These are kind of, we have lakes in the United States, Lake Madison in South Dakota. The lake has never been so clean, and they've never had so many fish, because fish, they love oxygen. They multiply, and you get far more fish if you have oxygen in the water. We're doing shrimp farms right now in India, and that's why we know how much oxygen is in the water, because we get a weekly printout of the oxygen, pH, and a few other things that are in that water. But yeah, it's to clean the water. We even had a request from South Dakota on a fire retardant in a big Okaloga aquifer, and we put revitalizers in and cleaned it up in a matter of days. So there are many uses for this technology. To be able to harvest, like we say, an average of 30 ton an acre of greenhouse gases, that's 36. It's about 70 or 80,000 tons of greenhouse gases per unit that you're taking out of the atmosphere and putting in the soil as a nutrient. Going back to carbon, there are many forms of it. It starts as a liquid we do, and then sugar, and then coal. And believe it or not, in England during the Second World War, if children got upset stomach or diarrhea, they used to go and get a bit of coal dust and feed them the coal dust, and it cured it right away. So we need this carbon in our environment, even in our own bodies. Does this revitalizer protect plants from EMF and man-made frequencies? Yes, it does. And
how does it protect us? How does it protect a human being? How does a revitalizer, which everybody, you see it on Peter's desk there, and we sell these all over the world. So just everybody know that if you ever want questions, you can call me on our 800 number at extension 5, and I'll get Peter on the line. No matter if you're into farming or with animals, or you're into crops, or you want to get it just to have a healthier family, or you want to protect yourself against EMFs. Go ahead, Peter.
Well, we have a machine that we set up. It does the counterclockwise, clockwise, counterclock, and that's canceling out the effects of all these cell phones and microwave towers, radar towers, that kind of thing. And you got to be, this is going to get so bad. They're putting up 20,000 satellites right now to beam G5 at us. But if you take areas where they're near the masts and you look at the corn all dies from the top down and not from the bottom up. And that way, the corn is not putting the nutrients from the stem and the leaves into the seed, into the kernels. It's being cut off before it can get there. And this is why a lot of the food that we have today is of a very poor quality. It's in the fields. And this year in our area, with the severe weather we've been getting, the crops are just pitiful. They're terrible. Anyway.
So let me ask you a question. Let's break it down like this. Okay. So just so that we can kind of go over things, because we've talked about a lot of different things. Let's say that I was a crop farmer. Tell me, break down what the Vitalizer will do for me. Then we'll talk about I'm growing pigs or cows or chickens. What will it do for me? And then let's talk about what it would do for me, for my family in my house, for oxygen content and health and wise. And let's talk about that.
Yeah.
Okay.
So with soil, it makes the soil lighter and fluffier.
Okay.
It reduces your fuel consumption to work those fields by 30 to 40%,
Wow.
because the tractors are not working that hard. And it also, in a heavy rain, it allows the water to percolate down through without washing off. But it all at the same time, it in a dry year, it holds the moisture in place in the soil. So the fuel thing is one thing that farmers, and of course, the crops would respond better. We have people say, well, we have one grower that grows cucumbers, and people don't understand why his cucumbers are looking so lush and healthy when theirs are not. So, yeah, if there's a crop farmer. Livestock, you have a better digestion, less odor, uh, more complete digestion in the feed. So we have poultry farms where there's virtually no smell off the belts in the barn with the manure, and when it's out in the store, it has a kind of a sweet smell, and it's composted, and then it can be applied to the fields and be available to the soil at that time. It doesn't have to go through this whole process of changing it from an anaerobic state to a aerobic state.
So you're saying you don't have to let your manure sit for a year. You can utilize it right away.
Well, our farmers down in Eastern Ontario, they get out on the fields and get their crops in the ground. And then after the crops are all in, they take off their first, and every time they take off a cut of silage, they spread the manure on those fields. There's no burning, and the crops just absorb that and take it and really start growing again. Mostly, if you put it raw manure on, it burns the crop and do a lot of damage.
Right.
Um,
Let's say I was a pig farmer. What am I going to notice? Will the quality of meat, or what about illness and disease? What about that?
well, that's one of the things. We have the water units that we make in South Korea. They get 90% less mortality. There's no smell in the barn, and there's no smell in the pits outside. And those pigs are going to market 10 to 20 days sooner.
That's using the water unit. That's not about the vitalizer.
We're not. Yeah, but it's not the Revitalizer. But the Revitalizer does the same thing.
Yes,
it does this. Yeah, that's about all we need to say. Now, certainly with the dairy industry, the aerobic bacteria in the manure. See, all these greenhouse gases that animals produce are being picked up again and put back in the soil as carbon. It's like a wheel that's turning. They belch. It's part of their digestive system. They belch out CO2, pick it up, put it back in the soil as carbon.
It's just not being recycled efficiently right now. So we don't want it in the atmosphere. We want it back in the soil.
That's correct. Yeah.
Okay.
The more we get in the soil, the bigger the crops, the better the food, the less cost it is to work that land, and it's the way it is.
That sounds amazing.
Yeah. So that basically covers everything we wanted to discuss at the moment on the Revitalize. I'm sure when we come back to questions and answers, there'll be more questions.
Absolutely. So everybody out there, I want you to understand that if you like this show, make sure you see the crystals and EMF protection. And we're going to be doing a show, and make sure you go on YouTube to watch that show. This is one of them right here, okay? And they come in different styles. And this one here is actually for the home. So you'll want to check that show out, but just know this. On December the 11th at 3 p.m. Pacific Standard Time, we're going to be taking all your questions, and we'll have a Q&A, a live Q&A. You can send it in on Facebook. You can send it in on Instagram. You can send it in on YouTube, okay? Or you can put your questions in on Intercom on our website, and we're going to answer them live. Or you can send them in with this show on Facebook or on YouTube. Just write them in, and we'll collect them, and then we'll answer them. Or you can do it live, and we'll answer them right away live on the 11th of December at 3 p.m. Pacific Standard Time. Okay? And you're going to love it. You're going to love what we've got to say about EMF protection in the home and on your body when it comes to crystals and EMF protection. So, Peter, what would you like to leave our audience with before we go?
Well, I think it's time we looked at the simpler way of operating agriculture in this country. Back when I grew up as a kid, I mean, it was simple. I mean, the farmers, they would go out in digging ditches and they would have a bottle of cold tea and a big block of cheese and a slice of bread. They sat down and they enjoyed that. It was nutritious and delicious. When I grew up, there was no such thing as cancer or all the other ailments. People didn't get sick like they do today. So let's try to get back to producing healthy food, healthy environments, and healthy people. And I tell you, healthy people are happy people.
Yeah, they absolutely are. So everybody
Yeah.
understand something. Everybody can use a revitalizer. And the good thing about this is we know it might be new and it might be new to you. And that's why we're going to offer you a money back guarantee on this. That if
One thing I'd like to suggest
Sure.
is everybody that gets this revitalizer, send me details, like a picture of where it's buried or sitting and the area to be covered, and possibly if it's an animal or plants, so that I can go back and double check and do the oxygen readings, hydrogen, carbon, all those elements. I can do a quick scan and then I know it's working and I don't have to worry about it again. But it has to be set up properly, the acreage to be covered. That's all we need.
And that's what we're going to do. We already have a few people with them. So understand that if you get a revitalizer, you'll be going on the phone with Peter. We'll be tracking all of this. And then we're going to want to hear because, remember something. We're offering you a money back guarantee that this is real and that it's going to increase your crops. It's going to increase the health of your crops, the health of your animals, and the health of your children. Okay? And one revitalizer will cover how much area, Peter?
We recommend 2,000 acres, but
Yeah.
we sent the one up into, I guess it went north of you, and
That's right.
by toning down, instead of putting in 30 ton of carbon, we were putting in 20 ton of carbon an acre, and we were covering that 5,000 acre lot of land.
There you
But
go.
we'd like to stay within the 2,000 to 3,000 acres is a better way of doing it.
Yeah.
But anyone should be placed near the homestead where you see there is a connection. Farmers know every field, and this technology can pick up his mental reading thoughts and broadcast to the fields that he owned. One thing with radionics, it will not go onto the neighboring farm. You're not going to be aiding your neighbor because it's a law and the principle of radionics. You do not try to change anybody's environment. So the program is designed to stay right on that farmer's land and not his neighbor's, if you can understand that. But that's how it works.
Is there anything else that we need to know about the revitalizer?
No, not really. This time of year, you say, well, the fields are sleeping. Well, but the environment needs all these elements put down in the soil for when the land wakes up. All our technology has the energy of the moon, the sun, and the stars, because they all influence life on this soil, on this planet. We're able to, with special camera, capture that and put it right into the boxes. That's basically all I can really add to it. There are other things, but we are evolving. That's the other thing. If you buy one of our protectors or bodyguard, and it's constantly being upgraded. When we come through with another innovation, it's automatically fed back into everyone out there. So we're constantly upgrading the Revitalizer and the crystal products.
So what everybody I need you to understand is, and I don't expect you to understand this, okay? But if you understand that the invisible creates the physical, all right? and that it's always been about energy, and it's always been about frequency, and it's always been about light. And that's what makes the universe go round, not the world. And that what Peter was saying is when he upgrades, whether it's the protector for the house, whether it's the bodyguard for your body, or whether it's the revitalizer for the farm or for the whole property that you live on, whether it's for animals or crops or for human beings or for protecting your property, when he upgrades one, they upgrade all. And understand, we don't expect you to believe it, but that's why we offer you the money back guarantee, that you're going to feel it, you're going to see it, you're going to experience this. All right? You know, it's called putting your money where your mouth is and proving that the invisible actually creates the physical, and it actually can change life as we know it today. Right, Peter?
That's correct, yeah. And, we found this out. When you look at a sewage pond and they're putting bubbles in, the bubbles just come straight to the top. With radionic oxygen, it stays right on the bottom until it's used by the fish and the microorganisms, the bacteria, everything working in that water. It supports their life. It's quite a hard thing to believe, but we've taken samples deep down in the water, and they've been in the 20 parts per million of oxygen. Yeah, it's a lot to take in, and I understand that because I've spent 40 years getting this far. Actually, my whole life has been revolving around a way of improving life on this planet. And now I think we are in a position that we can actually make it happen. And, we're going to be talking about this after?
Yes.
Yeah, okay, because even if you can't get this one, you could buy this and put it in your house. It does 200 feet around. It's like a big ball. So it's 200 feet above it, 200 feet below it. And this, if you put the oxygen in a septic system, you never have to pump it. There's no smell. It just, the bacteria, as if you put in some bacteria to start with, you never have to pump it out again. It keeps it clean. These things will do that.
And with the bodyguard, it's 15 feet up, 15 feet down, and 15 feet around.
That's correct. Yeah. Yeah.
All right.
Yeah. So I think you want to go on to the next one, or?
So I want to thank everybody for joining us today, and make sure, like I said, check us out for the crystal protection and EMF, okay, with Peter Webb. And don't forget to check out the show, okay? If you can't watch it, December the 11th, make sure you check out the Q&A. It's called Revitalizing, okay? Revitalizing and EMF protection with Peter Webb. So you're going to want to check that out as well. Okay, so I want to thank you for joining me today, and thank you to everyone who watched today's show. We would not be doing this without you. This is your show, and we're going to have lots of great speakers that are going to teach us how to have the life that we've always deserved. So make a note, everyone, also that every Monday and Friday at 3 p.m. Pacific Standard Time, when I'm not traveling, okay, I will have a live Doc Talk Q&A where all your questions will be answered live and in person, whether we're talking about emotional or we're talking about nutrition or detox, okay? Everything comes on the table with that show. We will give you the most powerful personal take action steps to all your questions that no one else seems to answer. Okay? You can join us live on Facebook, Instagram, YouTube, or Doc of Detox show. Every show is time-stamped on YouTube with your questions. So you can go directly to your question so you don't have to watch the whole show if you don't want to. Please let your friends and family know they now have a choice. Become the master of your life and the light of your family. Please leave a like on this show if you enjoyed what was discussed. Also, please subscribe to our YouTube channel and click on the notification bell to never miss a show again. You won't want to miss what we have in store for you. And remember, okay, everybody, it's Braveheart. 3, 2, 1, we got this. If you'd like to get my Braveheart free, go to braveheartfree.com, okay? God bless and have the best day of your life. And like I said, join us for the crystal EMF protection, and on December the 11th with Peter Webb, Q&A, challenge him, and I think that you're going to be pleasantly surprised. God bless. If you're looking for life-saving and life-changing information, well, you've come to the right place. Don't forget to click and subscribe. Stay connected.